Hey everybody, tonight's video is going to be about the multiple track mechanical slider by unknown maker in both Ultim or PEI and Bakelite or PF. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but very interesting piece. 4 different track options. You can pick one of each, or you could use all 4 or 3 or 2. But I think you're best off using one at a time. We'll take it apart, we'll compare it with a few other things, weigh it, measure it, do the usual, and talk about Bakelite, which is a really interesting material for this day and age. I was really surprised, and that's what really drove me to get this orange one. So yeah, please join me, stick around. So like I said, what intrigued me was the fact that this is Bakelite, and honestly I've been trying to get this for a while now. I've been keeping my eye on it, but it was only available in one place, which I don't recommend, but I do buy it there occasionally because in cases like this you can't find it anywhere else, and that would be Marcia Linda. I'm not going to provide a link for that, but I will give you a search phrase here that you can use on AliExpress, and it should bring you up to this. This is the only store that has these and has had them for a while now. My curiosity got the best of me. I decided to take a chance, because when you order stuff from Marcia Linda, you are definitely taking a chance. And luckily I got what I ordered. There's no problems, no issues. But this is not an endorsement of that store. So you might be asking yourself, what is Bakelite? Well, I'll tell you. It's one of the earliest plastics that we have, and I happen to have, this is one of the reasons I was so interested, I happen to have 2 pieces here. These are my grandmother's, my mom's mom. On the certificate here, I won't get it out, but it's interesting. There's a note on there that says, Christmas gift from my aunts Lois and Lodi, my mom's 2 sisters, 1945. So it was popular clear up until then. It really says in the Wikipedia's, when you look up on it, it says it was popular until, up until about then, and other plastics took over. But up until then, this was the plastic that you saw everywhere. Hairbrushes, telephones. Here's a few other examples. There's some more pens. Then I have a few images I found on the internet, radios mostly. And you'll notice the style's Art Deco in there. They're probably from the 1930s. But just anything you can think of that was made of plastic back at around 100 years ago was most likely Bakelite. And over the years, I've ran into those antique pieces. And because when I was young, I would get electronics from old electronics from garage sales and stuff, and take stuff apart. And that Bakelite was pretty brittle, but you have to figure it was probably well over 50 years old at the time. But I'm really pleased with it. I'm happy that I got it. Hopefully it'll turn up at other stores. It does have 4 tracks, and you can set it up with 4 different haptic responses. This one has the most dense. This one has the least dense. This one, of course, I said was Bakelite, and this one, of course, is PEI, or Ultim. I like to call PEI Ultim, and I like to call PF Bakelite. I just think they sound better, but those are actually trade names. Real quick, just for scientific purposes and documentation purposes, let's talk about that. PEI is what this is. Polyether imide, and PF is what this is, or phenyl formaldehyde. So that doesn't sound too good, does it, formaldehyde? But I'm not concerned. I'm not really concerned about it. It is different feeling than I thought it would be. I mean, compared to those pens, it's more, maybe because it's new and because it's fresh. Those pens are very old now. It has the feeling of a waxy surface. I want to say it has like a G10 look, a G10 weight, G10 being fiberglass, but a waxy feel to it. And I can tell that it's machined, at least I'm almost certain it is, because I didn't look at it under a microscope or anything yet, but I could feel machine lines and I could see them when I look at it close. So it's not cast, it's not die cast or anything. And it has a nice feel and a nice sound to it. It is reminiscent of Peak, not so much PEI. This is, of course, very dense, very hard plastic, and makes kind of a loud pitch. This feels more like, it's like Peak. I think probably most closely like Peak. One of the things I've read about it also is that typically Bakelite has a smell to it. I can't smell anything with this one, so I think that's a positive. But if it does smell, they said it smells often like printed circuit boards, which like I said, I'm familiar with electronics if I didn't say that before, but printed circuit boards do have a particular smell. Well, I guess you could call it an electronics smell, but I can't smell anything on this. They said even if you rub it a little bit, maybe you can make it smell like that, but I can't detect anything. So it doesn't stink, and that's a good thing. They both have lanyard holes, but that little bit of material there is so thin. I bet it's under I know it's under a millimeter, but it's very thin. And the hole diameter I don't think is any bigger than probably 3 millimeters. So you're not going to get paracord through either one of these. And I'd be hesitant to put anything on them. Now, these weren't terribly expensive, but it'd be a shame to have this hanging on a keychain or something and then look down one day and see that it's not there anymore because this tiny, thin wall of plastic broke on you. So, yeah, these were about, they were the price the same, so I got them for about $30. And do I think they're worth that much? I think they're worth about $20 probably. When you consider the rebound slider and PEI, you can get those for about $12 to $15 now. Those are very simple. They don't have a big slab of PTFE Teflon in the middle, so that has to add to the price a little bit. So I think 30 is fair. 20 is probably where the price ought to be, but not a big deal. The quality calls for it to be a little bit less. I mean, they could have used much better screws here. That's one of the things I want to talk about with this one. You know, the devil's in the details, and that's one of them. So we'll move on from there. So the other thing that's interesting is the 4 different track options on this. I do have other sliders that are like that. This one only has 2 different track options on it, but you could put one on either side. In this case, it's a ball plunger, so you could put one on either side, or you could put one on both sides. But it gets very mushy, and I would advise against that. You know, pick one side that you like. I'd say the same thing for this. When it arrives, it has 2 springs and 2 balls, and I don't remember which. One was on one side, one was on the other side. But you can see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4 location options for springs and balls. Right now I only have one located here at the tip of my pinky. And that means it is on this row, which is the most dense pattern. On this one, the Bakelite one, I have it set up on the least dense pattern. So again, we'll just cover the difference between these two. So I only know the count of clicks on those 2 options, and this one's 8 in either direction, and this is 13 in either direction. And one of the things we'll do here is we'll take this apart and try out the other 2 modes and find out how many clicks those are as well. Okay, let's do some comparisons and measurements and whatnot, and then we'll get on to the disassembly. So here are the 2 most common comparison pieces I have. The CP3 from Mackie, and the top B slider from Metal Toys DZ. size, we are at 53 millimeters tall, 26 wide, and about 12 to 13 in thickness. When it's fully extended, whoops, I'm getting 74 millimeters. Alright, there are no magnets in these. So this is the PEI one, coming in at 18 grams. The Bakelite or PF version, 19. Okay, before we take these apart, let's see what came in the box. So they give you a little lanyard there. Tricky getting that one through. Let's take this stuff out. And there was nothing underneath either of these. You always check. What you get are 2 extra stainless steel balls and 2 extra glass balls, and it looks like 3 extra springs. They all look to be the same size and gauge to me. I think they're probably all the same strength, but extra parts are better than no extra parts, so I'm happy with that. I don't really care about that. This is important. For one of the first times ever, I'm going to tell you, if you don't have the proper screwdriver, you should probably keep the one that they give you, because this is a strange Phillips 000, and we encountered problems with that whenever this came out. This is the 01 EDC original mechanical 3-level slider, and it used the same kind of screws, and everybody stripped them out. I was able to call and order extra screws that were a different kind. Mine are black, and they're now Phillips 0. So they're very easy to strip down. The lesson here is it's best to have the right tool to do the job, and I don't want to bore you with all this here. I want to go over quickly, but in this case, over here with that metal one, what I ended up doing was stripping the metal screws because they were tightened in so tightly. On these, if you're not using the right screwdriver, you're more likely to strip the threaded hole in the toy than you are the metal. You're not going to strip the metal screw, you're going to ruin the toy. So it's important to have a good sense of touch. And to get a good sense of touch as to how tight or loose this is, you need the right tool that fits the fastener. And unfortunately, most of you won't have a Phillips 000. And it's odd. It's really strange. I discovered this whenever I was trying to figure out what was wrong with these and what kind of screws I wanted to get for it. What that is, here's a Phillips 00 or Phillips 0. Okay, and here is one. It's a Phillips 00 that I modified, and I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but the one that's reddish there, I tried to differentiate the two, it has a slightly flattened tip. This one has a slightly flattened tip, and that makes it into a Phillips 000 essentially. I mean, I know it looks a lot bigger, but down here at the tip, it's just the right size. And you'll notice this one, the one that came with it on the right, definitely has, let's see if I can focus that better, definitely has a cut off tip. So that engages the fastener a lot better. And if you use something that doesn't fit, you're going to be pushing too hard and not feeling whether or not the screws turned in the whole way. And you're likely to strip the threads in here. So yeah, that's where my lecture ends. And taking this apart begins. Okay, what we're going to do is take this one apart and keep this one the way it is. This one is currently set up with the most detents, so 13 clicks in either direction. And this one has the least clicks in either direction at 8. We're going to change this one and then compare it with that one. So I've got my modified screwdriver tip here. We're just going to carefully remove these screws. Now at this point you want to start holding this together, squeezing it together like that. That one might not want to come out. One of these was giving me a little bit of trouble earlier. Okay, no matter. I'm going to bring these back together and I'm just going to lift off the top. Oh, it's kind of upside down there, but it doesn't matter. We've got 2 balls and 2 springs. I've apparently lost 1 ball and 1 spring. I don't know how I did that. Where'd they go? Oh, I'm an idiot. I only have 1 ball and 1 spring on the inside here. I'm so used to opening these up and having 2 springs and 2 balls, you know, 1 on either side. And like I said, if I didn't say already, when this comes in the mail, there is a spring and a ball loaded on each side. So what you end up with is a mix, and it gets too mushy. When you mix these up, you could probably get different, you maybe even get higher numbers of clicks. You'll never get lower numbers of clicks, but in combinations, you could get higher numbers of clicks, but it gets mushy. I like the fact that you can differentiate between the 4 different patterns there. So yeah, I only had 1 spring and 1 ball in there to begin with. But you can see here, this part, the Teflon part, just slides back and forth. There's what I used to call a dead stop. I'm trying to get away from saying that and just calling it a limiter or a limiting screw or limiting pin. But the limiter is right there. You know what, I'll have to figure out, I have to go get the screwdriver tip for that so we can figure out what that is, just so we know what it is. I can knock this screwdriver screws out of here. There we go, it's just stuck in there. Yeah, what you do is you put the spring and ball in one of these 4 holes, and then that gives you access to one of these 4 different patterns here. Let me move this out of the way because we're getting some ugly glare off of it. So I went and found the proper screw for the limiting. I found the proper bit for the limiting screw, and that would be a T6. So this is something you probably won't need to adjust. And I would advise maybe not messing around with it because, again, this is very soft Teflon, and we'll take it out and put it back in again here. I'm just afraid, I'm really afraid of stripping those threads. But here's your limiting screw. Not very big. Of course, now that that's off, this comes off completely. That just rides along this little groove down the middle and hits either end and keeps it from sliding all the way off and then letting your springs and balls shoot out. So let's put that back in. And if you have to put it back in, gently tighten it in until it interferes, until it hits there. When it stops, see, now it doesn't want to move on me. I'm going to back off a little bit until it slides freely without any interference. And I'm going to leave that go. If it ever gets sticky, that's something to check. That it might have vibrated loose or vibrated downward and come into contact with the other side. Hopefully that'll stay in place. Teflon is kind of soft and grippy, so I'm kind of hoping that won't be a problem. So far it's not a problem in any of the other ones that I have, but there you go. If you want to adjust that, you need a T6. Now, let's move on. Okay, like I said before, we're going to be keeping this one at its most dense setting, which is, in this case, the middle right one here. It's going to get a little confusing, but that's, try to do it quickly for that sake. So right now we're on this one, and for reference, the most dense or the least dense pattern would be this one. We'll throw that back together again. We don't need to fully reassemble this to test how it sounds. I can just sort of squeeze it together. So this is how it was, but we'll do this again. Oh, what's wrong? What did I forget to do? Oh, I put the spring and the ball in backwards. Well, good thing I noticed that. And I have to remember where I'm going. I want to put it on this one. Put the spring on top of the ball, and then put this back on. So here's how it was originally. That's the most dense compared to this. I'm sorry, this is the least dense compared to this. And so, the next setting would be, get the ball out of there. We went from here. If we want to go to the next densest setting, we would go right beside it. So we'll put the spring and the ball in over here. Get close to the middle. You know, I just realized something. I believe, and I should have known this when we were doing it, but I neglected to count the clicks. I'm starting to believe that this side is exactly the same as this side. So that means this isn't really a 4 individual track slider with 4 different textures. It's these two that are the same. Then this one that's a little bit more dense, or the most dense, and this one, which is the least dense of all. So these two outer ones are kind of in the middle ground. And I guess you could use 2 springs at the same time and balls, and then they would be synced up because they should be the same. I mean, I just took a break between the last segment and this one because that caught my eye, and I just thought, if you count these out as you move this down, they're exactly the same on both sides. So yeah, that's what I'm going to go with. That's what this one is set up with then. This one has actually this one is not, this is the most dense setting. We're still good with that, which means this row right here, that has the most detents, and that gives us 13 clicks. So the way I had it set up before with the least number of detents was over here. That gave us 8 clicks. So this was 8 clicks. This was 13 clicks. Let's put in these 2 and find out what this one is, because we did neglect to count those. And like I said, I didn't realize until now that these 2 sides are exactly the same. That's what I'm going to go with. Let's go ahead and plop 1 ball and 1 spring in. And just for fun, we'll plop a ball and spring in on the other side. I could have prepared this a little bit ahead of time. Let's go with a glass ball. Whoops, almost had it. And you might be able to start to hear my neighbor's sound system downstairs. He's not a bad guy, but I think he's a gamer, and I think he's got a subwoofer. So it constantly sounds like there's a distant thunderstorm up here, which I don't mind it so much. All right, we got our extra spring and our extra ball. So let's put that on the opposite side. Okay. Again, you can sort of move this back and forth a little bit. You want to try to get those springs to stand up nice and straight and pointing straight up. Make sure the lanyard holes are lined up, and that'll also line up with these indentations for the springs. Drop it straight down on there. Now this should have 13, no, we don't know how many clicks this has yet, do we? And that's fairly intense. So we got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, hard to do with it not screwed together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 clicks. I like that actually. I like that middle ground. I also like the fact maybe it's a little bit stronger, a little more intense because there's 2 springs instead of just 1 spring. Now this is the most dense setting with, with 1 spring. And this is the middle ground that has the 2 outer detents being utilized. I like that a lot. I might keep these both set on that. Well, that's an interesting discovery. Interesting discovery. I've had these for a couple days now, but I have not had a really good chance to look at them. And then look at that, I did damage. I did damage one of these springs. And I'll bet I did that when I had it installed upside down there a little earlier. Because it gets caught when you don't have the ball in there and you put the spring in there first. Well, the end of the spring wants to rub against those detents and it gets caught and drug underneath. So there's another spring that I ruined. And we'll just dump this out here. Just to review, this one with the most detents, 13 clicks, has a single ball and spring set up in this hole for this row here. And if you want to set it up for 8 clicks, you can put it in this row, a single ball and a single spring in this hole. And I'll give you 8 clicks. And then if you want a nice middle ground, 11 clicks, you can either put one ball and spring on this side and one ball and spring on this side, or you could put a ball and spring on both sides for a more intense effect, and it'll hit these 2 outer tracks and give you 11 clicks. So there we go. I think that pretty much explains it. I've taken it apart and put it together enough here. We don't need to do that again. I think that's all I have to say about it. Again, make sure keep that extra screwdriver because it's important when you're putting it back together again. You want to feel you're not over tightening it. Very easy to damage these threads. PEI is holding up pretty good, I think, for threads. I was really concerned about plastics and threads and doing damage by misaligning the threads or just tightening it too much. But PEI seems to be holding up pretty good. Who knows about Bakelite? I have no idea, but it feels pretty dense, and I've taken it apart several times now. I didn't have any trouble putting it back together again, so it's fairly dense. I'm pretty happy with it, but you'll want to keep that screwdriver. That's it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. Bye.